Happy Mother's Day! My name is Noemie
And I'm Sharnikya Howard.
and we are sister friends.
Yes,
And
indeed.
and we are sharing a little bit about us through this Happy Mother's Day podcast.
We're sharing a lot. It's for the mothers, the aunties, the godmoms, the ones that have a tribe, that are looking for a tribe, that are open to new experiences, that are
Anxious and curious about life.
Yeah, it's for you.
Yep. But we also want you to share your perspective on what we're talking about. So we welcome you along this ride. Happy Mother's Day! Happy Mother's Day!
First of all, I am joined by Buffy the Body today. I mean, girl.
Thanks, boo.
So cute.
I feel like Buffy the Body. First of all, she tried to play me, and she was like, "Do you even know who Buffy the Body is? Like, I'm not
She's
like
so
12.
young.
I'm not that young.
Younger.
I'll be 34 this year. I'm a grown woman.
Yes.
No, like
Yes.
legit, I be feeling like a kid still. Like
So
I do.
lively.
I'm not gonna say that I feel like a kid, but I will say that like growing up when I saw like women in their 30s, like when you're 18, you're like, I'm not gonna be 30. And now I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
like I feel young-ish until I'm around like a 24-year-old, and I'm like, what are y'all?
I don't even want to be.
Like, what are you doing? But this was not part of what we were supposed to talk about, but it did make me think about, like, so I have younger cousins, and I remember just the emotional, like, turmoil that you go through at that age. And, like, my older cousins would be like, girl, you don't even know nothing yet. First of all, don't say that to a younger girl, because it is the end of the world for them at that point. But me looking back at myself, it's like, girl,
You were tripping.
you were tripping.
Of everything.
And like,
of every boy.
He wasn't even worth
He
it,
wasn't
girl.
even cute.
He wasn't even cute. He could not handle the life that you have today. Like, that's what you want the father of your babies to be? No,
Well,
thank
listen.
you.
Oh, girl. Well.
Moving on.
Moving on. We attract differently.
Yeah.
But,
and we were different women. Like, and one thing, I don't know if I told you this, but I remember, it's so funny coming off of the heels of the conversation about style. Like, I'm in a place where I finally look the way that I've always wanted to look. And like, just growing up, I grew up, I'm an 80s baby, but I hate when people are like, I'm an 80s baby. Like, I was a baby in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s, And when you think about like just beauty standards and, just the way that it really affected my mental health, because I didn't look like the girls that everybody wanted to be or wanted to be with, that it really messed with my confidence in the image of myself. But looking at myself now, it's like, girl, you bodying, like you happy, like your hair is slayed.
It's that confidence within.
It's the confidence within. It's the confidence within, because it's like all the girls, they didn't look like me. You know what I mean? The it girls didn't look like me, but I feel like, I don't really care who want me. I want me. Like, I love the woman that I'm becoming.
We had a conversation on a previous episode, or I don't know which order.
On another
episode. And we were talking about like confidence, and I was saying like, these new curves, and I'm trying to figure it out. And I was just listening to you and like the confidence that you have about like your body and the skin that you're in. And it was just so beautiful to hear, because especially, and to hear it out loud, like, and to see it and to know that really is your truth, because that can be really difficult for women, especially as our bodies change, as our lives change. Good or you can work out for months and see a difference in your body and still miss your old body. So it just it ebbs and flows. But it was just really beautiful to hear. And then when I got home, I'm like, I'm kind of bad.
She a baddie, like, girl. And I hype my friends up, but I don't lie.
Yes.
Like, I won't say anything, but I won't lie. Like, if you wear an outfit and you don't hear me say, girl, you look cute, I don't think it's cute.
Ditto. But it is so important to have that in your circle.
For sure.
To see it in yourselves. I love that you're always like, I'm cute.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And I didn't always feel that way growing up, being the little chocolate girl and people saying things like, "You're so cute for a dark skinned girl." I'm like, what does that even mean?
I hate that that's a thing. And now
Um,
everybody want little chocolate babies.
but so growing up, I didn't put a lot of emphasis on my outer appearance. It was I relished in the compliments about my intelligence, and so much so that like I remember when I started as a consultant years ago, and I love to. I was that was that time where I was like getting dressed up and all things, and people were complimenting me on my looks, and I was just kind of offended. Like, no, and thinking like, but I'm really smart, and not recognizing that like it's fine, you can be both. But I
sure can.
Absolutely. But growing up, I just really appreciated the comments more so about intellect, just because there was a lot of negative thoughts around my complexion, and not that I don't recall like being teased by other children about it. I really don't remember that, but I knew the images in the media. I knew I didn't see myself. So I think that really had a lot to do with what I thought was
pretty. Do you feel like this is turning into? We're gonna get to the point of this episode in a second.
Maybe this was the episode.
I was about to go to that. Do you feel like? Let me tell you where the question is coming from, and then I'll ask the question. So, like for me, I feel like a lot of my confidence came from my mom and her sisters. Like and even my dad too. Like I never walked into a room and somebody was like, "Ooh, girl," that was all the time. Like I could be wearing a nightgown, you know what I mean? And it's just like I know that I don't know how intentional it was. Honestly, if y'all know my mom, it was probably just her hyping herself up. Like, look at what I created. Look at my, you know what I mean? But what kind of helped me kind of fight like society was the people in my family, like the women that I saw. So like me loving the body that I'm in right now is because I'm shaped like my aunties. You know what I mean? Like I have the body that the women that I looked up to in my particular family looked like. Like I feel like I look like my mom. You know what I mean? Yes. Like my mom in when she was in her 30s. So, do you feel like you had that, didn't have that? How does that all kind of... y'all. How does that play into you now?
What I remember most vividly is, I was raised by my grandmother for a large part of my early childhood. And what I remember most vividly are the comments around how smart I was. So it doesn't mean that's what I remember. And like I think that played a large part in where I identified most of my value. I'm sure they thought I was beautiful, but it was always that I was so smart. And I remember, like even if there was this one boy, Tamont.
Where you at now?
In the second grade. But he would tease me a little bit. Like he might say something about like my clothes, but I would be like, I'm smarter than you. So it was that was always my comeback. And yeah, but once I moved with my mom, now my mom was quite, to me, she was glamorous. Like just so cute and so well dressed and always in a dress and just very funny, charismatic. Like she's the one that everyone wanted to be around. And
sounds like somebody I know.
And she always had a bit of a shape. And like you said, like I'm starting to like own that. And like my grandmother was very shapely. And on Easter, my mom said something like, "You starting to look like Queenie Howard," and it was like the highest compliment to me. And I know she was saying it because she was looking at my butt. But it was like, oh, like I could love that.
So we're gonna try to bring this back into what we're supposed to be talking about today.
Well, I don't know, because I kind of feel like this. I could talk about this with you.
Okay, let's talk about it.
We're raising little girls. And how do you want her to see her body in this? And a lot of things are like hypersexualized.
Very hypersexualized.
And, I was not exposed to a lot of the things that they're seeing now until like close to high school. Dare I say, maybe not even until my sophomore year. So how do you want her? Do you want, and it might change, right? So I'm not, boxing you into an answer, but when you think about like these little girls that we're raising, do you envision her as a more free spirit with her body? Even, just
I understand. It's
all the
okay.
things.
Let's just throw it all out there. I do. My mom is this free spirit, and let me just give you. And I know she wouldn't mind me sharing this, but I feel like growing up, my mom was raised very religiously. I mean, and she's still a very religious person. My mom is super Catholic, in church all the time. You know, I think as a young kid, she actually wanted to be a nun, but she fell in love with my dad, and she's like, "Well, clearly, you know, that's what's yeah. I'm not gonna be a nun anymore." And you know, when we're talking about like sexual identity and like sexual freedom, it was something that wasn't, you know, it was frowned upon, really. You know what I mean? Like, if you were curious about anything, like, that's the devil. You know what I mean? And I feel like with my mom, you know, she was very, you know, innocent, and, you know, she saved herself for marriage and all of those things. And you would think that her kind of having the upbringing that she had, she would instill those same values with me. And my mom would be the first person to be like, "No, you need to go out and test and see what you like."
What?
Yes, my mother.
Mama told you to sow your royal oats.
Can women sow their royal oats?
Oh, well, something like that. Whatever the female version of that is.
Maybe not so much to like be like what we say promiscuous, but like you don't have to save yourself for marriage if that's not something that you want to do. You know what I mean? And I think that, you know, I'm not going to go into like religion too much, but I do think that, you know, you have to know that you're doing things for the right reasons. You know what I mean? Are you doing things out of fear? Are you doing things because somebody told you to do? Do you still have the urge to do? Like, there's just a lot of things that kind of play into that. But I think the biggest lesson that my mom wanted me to learn was that I'm in control of my own destiny when it comes to who I decide to date, who I decide to sleep with, where I decide to be. And she didn't want me to tie my identity so much to how a man views me. You know, and of course we're thinking about heterosexual relationships.
Yeah.
She did not want that for me because it didn't fare well for her. So I think like for her, when she kind of entered the age and the time where you can have sex, like you're married, you have children, and I think that she felt like that there was a lot left to learn, and she wished that she had, I don't know so much if it's more experience, but I think she wished she knew a little bit more. And I think she would have been happier had she been, you know, exposed to a little bit more, opened herself to a little bit more. So I think about that a lot, you know, when I think about, I mean, I have 2 daughters, you know, and I'll be completely honest with you, like I was a teacher, and I studied educational, like pedagogy. I studied, you know, psychology of children, how they are aware about their bodies. Like our daughters know what they have and what they don't have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they are also very curious. And I think like, you know, we hear about kids like being curious and touching themselves and seeing what things are. And it's like, are you that parent that's like, no, I can't even have this conversation?
Right.
Or are you the parent that's like, yes, this is your vagina. You can touch it, but make sure your hands are clean. Don't let anybody else touch it. Has anybody else tried to touch it? You know what I mean? Calling it the right name.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I'm also just a free spirit in general. If anything, I feel like my kids might be like, Mom, like what? I'm like, what? Like, I got what you got. Let's talk about it, you know? So I just think that in general, I promote like freedom when it comes to like sexual freedom. My babies are young. Like, I don't even know.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I won't do this when they come to me, but I definitely think that by the time that conversation happens, it's not going to be something that I haven't prepared for. And the last thing that I want to do is like make my daughters feel like I'm not open enough for them to come to me and ask me those things. Or if they are curious about certain things, for them to feel embarrassed, you know? Like, if anything, I want them to be, my ideal situations, I want my daughters to be like, Ma, you gonna tell Auntie Shawn, y'all gonna laugh at me. Like, that's what I want. That's what I would prefer than for them to be like, no, I can't tell Mom because Mom's gonna freak out.
So my experience was the complete opposite. Like, we did not talk about those things at all.
So how did you learn about it?
School. So
your school taught you?
Yeah. We I can't remember what grade I was in, maybe the 6th grade when they started like sex education.
Oh, I never paid attention in those
classes. And well, if it were not for that, that is so my mom and my grandmother did not talk about any of those things. I grew up very Christian, very Baptist. So it was all about staying a virgin until you got married. And there was just no discussion around it. The assumption was that that's what you were doing, and that's what you better be doing. And I wasn't doing anything for a long time. But yeah, there wasn't any conversations around it. I knew not. No one said don't ask me. My mom and grandma didn't say don't ask me any questions, but I knew.
Yeah.
Do not ask these ladies anything about it. And yeah, it wasn't until 6th grade. Now, me and my mom had conversations around like your period, like when that starts. But she did not say, and I know, she did not say like, well, once you have your period, you can have a baby. Sex education class told me that. Wow. So there wasn't we kind of just shied away from it. And even as I got older and, started having sex and things like that, wasn't something that we talked about. I mean, it was probably clear that something was happening, but we didn't discuss it at all. And I remember, and let me say this, I wasn't doing it was for some time I was not doing anything. So I remember like even in high school, my little boyfriend was over, we're in the basement, and I have twin brothers, and one of them says to my mom, he's at the top of the steps, he can't even see us, and he's like, "Ma, Sharnika's down there kissing that boy." My mother said, "Yeah, right."
Oh, she knew.
She knew. She knew.
Well, maybe that's why they didn't have. I mean, clearly it's not a comfortable conversation, and it's not a conversation that we plan on having right now. Right. But I feel like let's push ourselves. Yeah. You know what I mean? We can cut this out. But we won't.
And for me, though, I love, everybody's experience is beautiful, right? But I like that there was no fear.
Oh, there was fear.
Oh, there was.
So there was fear until a certain point.
Okay.
There was fear until, I would say, there was fear, but there was also like, there was a point where I thought I was grown. You know what I mean? And I'm like, my parents are not my friends. I can't, what is that? I think everybody goes through that when you're like 14 through like 16, 17. It's just like, my parents just don't understand. And, my life is just this huge dramatic soap opera, and it's just life. But I think it wasn't until like later on in high school where, my mom and I, we had to have those conversations. Like, things are clearly happening, and as my mother, like you're my person.
Broach the conversation?
I think.
Oh God,
I'm trying to think how the conversation happened. A situation happened where I needed her, you know what I mean? And I needed to have like honest conversations with her. And so I think the fear was more in a like, we didn't have those conversations, but once the door was open to having those conversations, the conversations never stopped. They still haven't stopped. Yeah. Like to the point where now I'm uncomfortable, you know what I mean? But unfortunately, I think that's how it happens sometimes. I think you're in a situation where you got to have the difficult conversation, and I chose to trust my mom, and I chose to, I was in a situation where my parents also raised me in a way that I always trusted my mom first. I know like in high school, like you trust your friends and you go to your friends and you figure things out from your friends. I knew that the hardest part was going to be being honest with my mom. Not that my mom will share things, not that my mom will talk to me crazy, not that my mom would make me feel worse. She never made me feel bad. I was more concerned about disappointing her.
Yeah.
And I think once, like even when I got pregnant with Emery, I wasn't married. I wasn't necessarily scared to tell my mom, but I was like, I felt like I was going to be a disappointment. The response that she gave me is very indicative of the response that she's given me every time I talk to her was about something uncomfortable. She was so happy. She was like, "I thought you had PCOS. I thought you wouldn't be able to have kids." That is such a blessing. The concept of me not being married never came up.
Yeah. And
when it did come up with my family members, she's like, "Mind your business."
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just feel like I don't know what she did, because she hasn't always been that person. I was very afraid of my mom growing up, probably more because of her personality. But, I will say that like that's always been what stopped me from talking to her if there was ever a difficult conversation. It was disappointing her or her being disappointed in me because of what I did, or you know what I mean? But my mom has always been supportive, and she always had my back.
Yeah.
There was never ever, not once, been a situation where I came to her with anything and it came back to bite me in the butt or slap me in the face with some type of information. Never, not one time. And yeah, I'm just trying to recreate that.
I love that. I would say my grandmother was the one that I didn't want to disappoint. My mom was kind of cool. I think my mom just
I
made
feel
a
like
lot
your
of.
mom is mad.
Yeah,
cool.
she is so. She's way cooler than me. She's much more well rounded. My mom can party hard, like she is all the things.
Yeah.
So I never felt like there would be any judgment. I just felt like that there were some assumptions about me, and I had to live up to those. And that was more, and I think when you said the word disappointment, I think that's more so what it was than anything else. It's like I didn't want to go to either of them and share something that would cause them to be disappointed in me, probably because maybe I was disappointed in myself and I was just projecting that.
Yeah,
because she's always been super cool. Like I could do what she also knew her child. So like I didn't grow up with a curfew. I could do whatever I want whenever I wanted. My boyfriend could come over because clearly she knew I wasn't even giving the boy a kiss. Okay, so there were no rules and none of that. But there were just certain conversations I think that culturally, just because of the way my mom was raised, that we just didn't have.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Oh for sure.
And there are certain things that like if you were doing it, then you do that over there. But we don't. You know, it was that. And similarly, like when I told my mom that my mom wasn't married when she had me either. And so when I told her, she was so happy, like I mean, over the moon.
I mean,
yes,
I would be happy.
And
too.
I was old as I was older at that time.
I don't like the way you talk about my friend. Okay, fix that, please.
Yeah, I was a bit more mature, which I'm grateful for, you know. But she was very happy.
Yeah,
I would like to create. So I appreciate what I had. I would like what a similar experience to what you shared. And that's what I'm trying to create with Queenie too. It's like we can talk about anything.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, and like I said, we didn't plan on having this conversation, so I'm unpacking a lot of things now. I think one of the reasons why my mom and I were able to kind of have that shift in our relationship where we were able to speak openly is because even though I didn't share much about what I was doing or what I was going through, my mom had always shared a lot. So I always knew that my mom saved herself for marriage. And she never once said I had to do the same. I was raised as a good, Catholic girl. So those were things that I kind of imposed on myself, like ways of living that I thought I just had to, live. But, when I strayed away from that, it was never any judgment. Like my mom always allowed me to be an individual. She didn't care whether or not, you know what I mean, I made all the right decisions as long as I learned from them and I didn't put anybody in harm's way. I didn't harm myself. Like she never made me feel bad for making mistakes. And I think a lot of it had to do with the way that she was raised in such a strict place. And I think she also noticed that a lot of times when you're so strict on kids, the minute they have a little bit of freedom, they kind of they go off and do all the things, So for example, drinking, I've had alcohol before I was 21. It wasn't, it could also be Caribbean,
I did too. I'm not Caribbean.
But I never got drunk in college. I got drunk one time in college. I've gotten drunk twice in my entire life. The first time was after finals, senior year. It was my friends, you know what I mean? It was a Morehouse toga party. And if you're in the AUC or you went to school in Atlanta, you already know. I didn't even see them. I was that drunk. I don't know who was. I just knew. I remembered, I'd never taken shots or anything. And I'm like, okay, well, it's senior year and I just finished my last final. My girls used to drink and, I never really didn't. Let me just let loose one night. Girl, my college boyfriend at the time had to rip my toga off of me because it was sewed on. We had the sheets and we sewed it onto a really cute outfit. I was vomiting. It was just a really bad, situation. And I never did it again. And even now, I don't really drink. I think the last time that I sat down and had 2 glasses of wine was when Emery was younger. I'll have half a glass. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just not my thing. And I think same way that your mom knew her daughter, my mom knew her daughter too. I'm not the irresponsible girl that's just gonna be out here doing crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, have a thing for boys. I like the boys. I like to flirt. You know what I mean? And I just feel like like I said, once we kind of opened that door, like I just felt like she helped me become the woman that I'm supposed to, as far as my relationships with men. Like once we opened that up, I could go to her about any situation that I had with any little old boyfriend or situationship. Like I am maybe even too honest with my mom, but she eats it up. Like it's like chatting with a girlfriend, you know what I mean? But she also gives me really good advice. And she listens to me and she speaks to me not as her daughter, but as a fellow woman just seeking guidance from somebody who has some wisdom. Like it just, our relationship, don't get me wrong, mommy, you're crazy, but I love you. You know what I mean? And I also accept her for the woman she is. I know my mom and I are similar in some ways, but we are very not in a lot of ways. But she just respects me. And I think that's where it starts is, understanding like who your kid is and recognizing the ways that y'all are different and how are you going to really, I don't know, not push, but how are you going to help guide her into finding out who her truest self is?
And I love that you said like you begin to just you accept her for who she is because there's a lot that happens like in your childhood and you have questions and then you start to realize that these humans that were raising you were doing their absolute best with what they knew. Yeah. And that's the way I look at my mom. So my grandmother raised me for a good bit and then I moved with my mom. So when I was living with my grandmother, I only saw my mom during the summer for a number of reasons. And at this point in my life, I'm like, those reasons are really none of my business anymore.
Yeah.
Like everyone did the best that they could and life is good. And I appreciate her for who she is and what she is to me and Queenie. And she's amazing. Like in that, she walks in that grandma space and in that space as my mom. And my mom wasn't with me. And I think, and I have twin brothers and she parented us very differently.
Right. She was a different mom both times.
Completely. And with me, it wasn't really a lot of advice being given, but she would ask me a question.
But you feel like it was a loaded question?
Yeah. But she wouldn't wait for the answer.
So give me examples.
So she would say, I don't know, are you planning to go to such and such? But then that would force me to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing. Okay, let me think about that. Or did you do that thing? Like, and it was that. It was never like, hey,
and
let's
it made
sit.
you do the
it
mental
made
work
me
yourself.
Do the mental work. And I think my mom.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
She's just hilarious. And that lady, she knows when she don't have the answers.
Yeah.
So sometimes it might have been like, girl, I don't have the answer either, but you better think this through. Even with college.
Yeah.
Like I was sharing in another episode, my mom didn't force me to go to, she didn't, it was nothing. One day I came home, I said, I'm going to Morgan. She said, okay. The next week I said, no, I'm going to Bennett. She said, okay. But then in that, she's like, are you sure? But not I think you should do this.
Yeah.
Because she hadn't experienced it. I don't even think in that situation she didn't have anything to offer per se, but she knew that she wanted me to think about it. And so I think it was the little nudges like that with my mom. My grandmother,
tell me.
I mean, she was straight up, you're not doing that.
Oh, okay.
And like when I was in at Bennett, that's when I started drinking before I got to Bennett. My mom knew I had a fake ID to go see Chuck Brown. Right? It wasn't to drink. Gosh. It was more so to go see Chuck Brown, see Settle Thoughts.
And I know you now, so I'm just like, I couldn't even see you being that girl anyway.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. It wasn't that. So in college, though, I had a few more drinks. My drink was, my cousin Anita introduced me to the amaretto sour with a splash of orange juice.
I love the
amaretto
sour.
Grown.
We were so bougie back then.
But my mom, right? My mom was the one, she was just like, we had a curfew. She's like, don't call me if you get caught. My friends were drinking. My mom is the one who I would call and say, hey, Mom, T's really drunk. My mom would be like, well, she should probably have a beer That's going to help settle her stomach. It worked. No, that really worked. Yeah. Got my girl together. But my grandmother was the one, like, I know what happens on those campuses. I never been to one, but you better not be doing. And she would say, like, Bennett was all girls. My grandmother knew that A&T was across the street. Stay from across the street. That's how she would talk. Stay from across the street. Focus on your lesson.
Your lesson.
So it was just very, very different.
Happy Mother's Day!
This is so good.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're going into another episode.
It'll just be a part 2 of this episode.
Yes, because it's about
to be good. Yeah.